Can we have councillors to the chamber, please? Good afternoon, everyone. We're gonna begin the meeting. Councillor, we're gonna continue with the speakers. Yes. So we were on a speakers list, so we're gonna go to the next speaker. We were on item EY 31.4, which was the final report, High Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Character Study, and our next speaker is Ellie McLaughlin. Ellie. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, 5 minutes.
Pardon me. My name is Elle McLaughlin. I'm the president of the High Park Community Alliance. The High Park Community Alliance is comprised of approximately 800 members from the High Park North area. We represent homeowners and ratepayers. And we are, I'd like to address council today and ask that you adopt the official plan amendment 419. We believe that this amendment will help protect our neighborhood from overdevelopment. We'd like to thank the city for conducting the character study, which resulted in the draft amendment. As residents, we believe that protecting our neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood is very important, and it's reassuring that the city felt this was important as well. I can also say that this past month I witnessed a lot of visitors come to our area and exit the High Park subway station. And as they're on their way to High Park and to see all of the cherry blossoms, they also witnessed a lot of construction going on in our neighborhood. And we're hoping to be able to limit that somewhat in the future. I also sat on the High Park Character Study Working Group, and I would like to thank Allison Reed, Elizabeth Silva Stewart, and Jennifer Renault for their careful and thoughtful analysis in the character study, as well as their efforts in preparing the draft amendment. Something that I wanted to highlight today in particular concerning High Park itself and the amount of visitors that come to High Park every year, especially every summer and spring, is Section 3D of the draft amendment, which states the enjoyment of High Park will be protected by ensuring that adjacent development, particularly building height and massing, will preserve harmonious views and vistas from High Park. We do feel that it is important to recognize the association between High Park and the apartment neighborhood to the north, and to preserve those views for everyone in the city, not just residents of High Park North. For the residents of High Park North, we were particularly impressed with Section 4A of the draft amendment, which states a minimum of 65% of the total area will be open space, and a maximum of 35% of the total lot area may be covered by buildings and above grade structures. We also appreciate the item that states the maximum total building frontage along each street property line will not exceed approximately 2/3 of the total frontage of each street. So these are a couple of items that really stand out for us and that help respect the character of the existing buildings and of the neighborhood. With regards to built form, something that we are particularly satisfied with was the development, redevelopment, including mechanical penthouses, will be required to fit within a 45-degree angular plane. Pretty much everything that's in the draft amendment was satisfactory to our alliance, and we actually could not have asked for more help and consideration from the city, and again, for that we are very thankful. I myself have lived in the High Park North neighborhood for approximately 8 years. It's a wonderful place to live, and I know that we have a lot of long-term tenants who have been in the neighborhood for 30 years, 20 years, and this amendment will help to ensure that more people will be able to join our community, but with adherence to certain guidelines and regulations, and we're hoping that you will adopt the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? See none. Thank you very much. Our next up is Piper Morley.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon to Mr. Chair, members of the Community Council, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Piper Morley, and I'm legal counsel on behalf of the Toronto District School Board. We provided you with a letter of today's date, and I hope that you have that, but essentially what the letter does is it sets out our concerns regarding the acute pressures that the local schools in the High Park area are facing currently. And it also sets out a potential solution to that issue. Like the city, the TDSB was not anticipating the intensity of growth in this area, since the area has always been a stable residential neighborhood. There are certain hotspots within the city generally where growth has simply outpaced both the required infrastructure necessary to service growth and the community facilities in the area, including schools. This includes the Young Eglinton area, which is, as many of you know, experiencing unprecedented growth. To address this, the city took steps recently to include robust and comprehensive policies in the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. Those policies specifically address the concerns of growth and infrastructure on communities and community services. And in particular, that secondary plan includes a policy, and it's 9.5.1, that permits the use of a holding provision placed on lands which could be lifted upon the fulfillment of certain conditions, including the provision of adequate municipal servicing and the provision of community service facilities and parks. Similarly, in the recent TO Core Council decision, Council resolved to support the Toronto District School Board and the Toronto Catholic District School Board in advancing planning for school facilities facing growth-driven enrollment pressures. We commend the city in taking steps to ensure that those neighborhoods that experience unanticipated growth have the tools available to them to deal with this. In its recent policy decisions, the city has essentially recognized that schools are, from a complete community perspective, critically important to the functioning of local communities. In our letter, we asked the Community Council to adopt a recommendation. That's set out on the very first page of our letter, the recommendation, incorporating certain policies that we provide in a schedule. It's Schedule A attached to our letter. These policies, in a nutshell, recognize the role of schools in contributing to a complete community. That's just required by the growth plan, PPS, and the official plan, and also provide a pathway for addressing the cumulative impacts of the numerous development applications and the corresponding need for timely accommodation of the increased student enrollment. We note that the language used in Schedule A is very similar, if not in some cases identical, to the language in the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan. So I don't intend to go through it in detail unless you have questions about it. First, I want to explain why these policies are so necessary for this particular area. The High Park Neighborhood Study was undertaken as a result of two significant development proposals. Those two applications would add over 200 students to an already overburdened area from a school capacity perspective. Both of these applications are in a catchment area where the local public school is currently at 98% capacity. There is simply no room in the local school for the students that will be generated as a result of these developments. We understand that there may be upwards of 3,900 to 4,200 additional units in the study area in the future. To be clear, the public school facilities in High Park do not have sufficient capacity to accommodate any new development, let alone 4,000 new units. So how do we deal with this? We've provided you with our recommendations in Schedule A, just to go through them very briefly in a high-level manner. In the goals section of OPA 419, we propose to add 2 new goals, and they basically recognize community facilities as being required, commensurate to growth. And then we drill down a little bit further on exactly what the specific goals look like in the community facilities aspect, which is Section 8. Essentially, those policies state that community services and facilities will be required to support future development, that those services will be delivered in a timely manner and may be permitted in private developments, which frankly just represents the modern approach to living vertically as per city policies. We then operationalize these requirements by adding a new section to OPA 419 titled Phasing, and this part is critical. This is how it gets done. And the most important part of that section is the holding provision policy. And as I said before, this part specifically is identical to what's proposed to be in the Young Eglinton Secondary Plan at 9.5.1. It provides...
Wrap up, please. You're out of time.
Sure. It provides the community with a tool to ensure that development does not take place until there is appropriate provision of municipal servicing infrastructure, community service facilities, and public parks, amongst other things. It's TDSB submission that these policies are necessary in order to achieve complete communities and to allow growth to occur in a responsible way in the High Park area. Those are my submissions.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you for coming today. What's the local public school?
It is Kiel Public School.
And what other schools, elementary or JK to 8, are within the close area?
There are several. I actually have a map. If I put this on here, will it show up there? That's not the
okay.
clearest.
Oh, so there's the, you've got all of the enrollment numbers.
So 99% for Runnymede, 98% for Kiel. Howard Junior Public School is 95%. Our utilization rates, what we typically see is a well-functioning school is 85%.
Right. I used to be a school trustee.
Oh, okay.
So,
my apologies.
So that's the utilization rate in these schools. How has it changed with the advent of all-day kindergarten? Because that's consumed space, is it not, in schools? If you don't know the answer, it's okay.
I don't actually know the answer to that, sorry.
So the utilization, what is the TDSB does not get development charges because utilization rates across the city are generally much lower than that, correct?
Well, it's unable to get development charges because there's capacity within the whole structure, meaning that while we could bus students an hour out of the way to go to school, that's obviously not what a complete community is.
Right.
Complete community is where you walk your kids to school, drop them off, and pick them up at the end of the day.
So you said the developments are expecting to bring in 260?
Just these two that initiated this study, they're expected to bring in over 200. We don't have the exact number because obviously the number of units sometimes change. And with the 4,000 units, we actually don't know yet how many that would add. It depends on certain factors, as you well know.
Got it, okay. And do you have, of the 260 that are coming in, or anticipated, do you have a split between elementary and secondary?
It would be mostly elementary, but we do not have a split, no.
Okay, that's it, thanks.
Councillor Mamali, a question?
Yeah, it's not often that we get somebody from the school board up here suggesting anything. So it's good that you're here. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're saying. Are you suggesting that we don't allow for the density?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
All we're trying to do, and the policies that we provide in Schedule A, is just make sure that the accommodation that we have, that we can accommodate the students that are actually generated as a result of developments as they go forward.
So that's the next question.
Sure.
It's not our job to do that. It would be the provincial government's job to ensure that there's enough funds, capital funds, for you to be able to build another school within the catchment area.
Respectfully, sir, I disagree. The PPS, the growth plan, the official plan, all of these policies over the last 5, 10 years have all pointed to an integrated approach between land use planning and accommodation of students.
Which
So-
means what? That the city would help pay for new schools?
Oh, no. The
Okay.
city would basically provide, and what we're requesting here is a holding provision be placed on properties as they come forward. So as a developer comes forward with a property, we would put a holding provision, and essentially they would have to satisfy the TDSB that there was sufficient room in the local school. And if
Okay.
there wasn't,
But-
we do a long-term accommodation study every year.
But it, yeah, I'm having a hard time with this because the Catholic board has a different position on this. They've adopted a policy that takes from developers and helps build new schools.
Right, exactly, yes,
The TDSB hasn't done that.
that's right. So we don't have the ability to...
So why don't you do that?
Oh, we don't have the ability to have educational development charges. The Catholic school does, and actually, I don't know if you know this, but they've increased, or they're proposing to increase their development charge substantially.
Yeah, I think that what they've done is valid and it works for them. I'm surprised that the public board isn't doing that.
We don't have any ability under
The Act?
Under the Act, we have no ability to do that, and we're actually taking steps at this time to try
Okay.
to try to do that. But in the meantime, with the growth pressures, our schools are so over capacity at this point that we need to make sure that we're phasing development in a
But how would you
responsible
pay
way.
for the new schools?
We would apply to the
the
government
province?
for it, yes.
Okay, that was my initial point. It is the province that builds the new schools. There's not too much we can do to come up with the funds or, you know, the capital for that sort of thing.
That's right. We're not asking the city for any funds. All we're asking is that we phase the development in a way that gives us time to figure out how many students are going to, you know, be generated as
Which
a
makes
result of
sense.
development,
Yeah.
and then
You wanna know
develop a
what,
plan.
you wanna know what's gonna be built, when it's gonna be built, so you can make the decisions at the school board accordingly.
that's right.
All right, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Doucette, the question.
Thank you very much for coming today. I agree with Councillor Mamaliti, we don't often get TDSB, but thank you for being involved through the whole process. My question is this, you said, what was the capacity at Kiel right now?
Steel is 98%.
And we've just had an addition built there, am I not correct? We did what, 11, 12 classrooms in the last 3 years, did we not? Are you aware of that?
Could be the case. We're still at 98% capacity.
So we're now at 98% capacity in the local school after adding, I think it was either 12 or, Swansea got 12 or 14, so we had 2 additions built to our schools in the last 3-4 years, and we're now already at 98%.
That's right.
Where will children, in any development coming in within this catchment area, where will they be bused to? Do you know that yet?
They will be bused to north of St. Clair. We don't actually have a plan yet of where they would be bused to, but essentially they would not be able to be accommodated within the local area. The whole idea, and you well know this as well, our accommodation strategy is to make schools walkable. You know, to be able to have students and their parents walk them to school. That's the whole concept of a complete community as set out in the growth plan. And unfortunately, we would have to bus them, or we would have to in some way change the catchment lines or something like that in order to accommodate it. It's not just not ideal, it's not land use planning. It's not planning, it's a Band-Aid. So what we're trying to do here is actually plan this community appropriately.
And you mentioned that you're going to the province to try and change, is it to change the fact that city planning cannot turn down a development because the schools are full? Or is it to try and get
It's just
development charges
that's
to
right.
allow us to actually do more additions if you need to?
That's right. That is exactly what we're doing. It's for development charges.
Can you try and change the policy at the same time? Thank you.
We'd like to.
Councillor Nunziata, the question.
Okay, I mean, it's nice to have schools where kids walk to school, but that's not the case. Most schools in my ward, they're all bused. But what I don't understand is that there's, whenever a development application comes in, and it always has come in the past, the application is sent to the school board to review, and for years, the comments from the district school board has always been, we have no issues, we have no issues. They've never I'm telling you on the ones in my area, they have never commented that they can't not accommodate. And there's a number of schools that are being closed.
Right.
I have 3 in my, so why is the board closing these schools and then saying in another area, we don't have, we don't have capacity, like, yeah. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, so in terms
Like-
of our comments on, it's possible that the schools within your ward do have some capacity. I'm assuming that that's
Well,
that's
why
the case, and that's why we haven't taken issue with it.
Well, that's why they're closing them.
Right,
They're closing
Right.
schools in my ward, yeah.
right. So
So-
we wouldn't provide a comment that we're, you know, that they're over
Yeah,
capacity,
yeah.
because there is capacity.
But what I'm saying is that the money that the board is getting from these school closures, they can build new schools in areas where they're needed. I don't understand, like, what the board is doing. Huh? No, huh? No, okay, no, sorry. I don't think you can answer that question, but
Okay.
it doesn't make sense, in my opinion.
Counselor Holliday, the question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for speaking to us today. Similar to Councillor Nunziata's question, is there any look at the circulation process so that comments from the school board can be front and center in every development application? I remember a time when they were there, and I haven't seen them for a little while for perhaps many reasons, and buried in the body of reports, I know there is a review of school capacity in the area by a consultant. But is there a way that we can improve the process to have those comments front and center?
So we've actually already started that process as of 2017. As many of you probably know, when we're circulated an application, what we used to do is say, there's no capacity in this area, fair warning, and you have to put this in your agreements of purchase and sale so that people who are purchasing in this area know that their kids are going to be bused. They're not going to have that, you know, nice community feeling. However, we've now, since 2017, late 2017, we've been taking a much more aggressive approach, saying we do not support this development. And the reason we don't support it is because we don't think that it's good planning to have a development here when we don't have the ability to accommodate students. So we have changed our policy on that, and we are taking a much more active approach in applications as they come forward. But this is kind of why we're coming forward at the OPA level, because we're doing that on an application by application basis, preserving our ability to appeal if we need to. We'd also like to have something that's available to us, working with the city to provide a hold on the property, so that, you know, once we've determined that they're, you know, we cannot accommodate these folks, it's a matter of phasing it appropriately from that point.
So has TDSB staff ever recommended to the board that a development be challenged at the LPAT based on what you've told us today? And are you actively doing that?
We are actively doing that.
Okay. And I guess the last question, the big one is, the issue that you've described is not unique to this area or Yonge and Eglinton. I've seen it in my ward around here.
Absolutely.
What can we see on a broad basis in the city in support of the same concept of having the schools be a governing factor in development approvals?
So I can tell you what we have been doing. We're essentially at this point, you're basically number 2 on the list at this point. What we're doing is we're trying to identify those higher order policies like OPAs, because in an OPA, that's where you require the holding bylaw language so that we can actually use it when the development comes forward. So we're trying to identify, I think I referenced hotspots within the city. We're trying to find those hotspots, identify them, and basically as higher order policies like OPAs come forward, we come forward and ask that a holding provision be included within the policies so that we're able to act when we need to in coordination with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I have one question. It's probably going to be unfair to you, but I'm sure you can handle it. So if the school board now is going to start putting in comments that they don't support the application, do you think the city should have the right to oppose the sales of your schools that you're putting on the surplus list?
I'm not gonna.
Why is it different? Okay, Piper, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Viola Varga. Viola?
I don't know what more I could say. Just that I'm getting that the old, it's the same story here, that the city just can't break out of their narrow view of the situation, that High Park is both jointly owned by the province and the city, and that the city's, because of the downloading, has been given the responsibility, double responsibility, and the city was supposed to consult or to speak to the province, and unfortunately this has not worked out, and so tomorrow's election, and I aim to go to the province and ask to fix that. This is obviously not a workable situation, and I'm going to ask that this be uploaded so that the province can take care of its own jurisdiction again. Anyway, I hope that when the province, whoever's the leader tomorrow, when I bring this in front of them and say that this is not workable for the city cannot take care of a provincial matter, is unwilling, I don't know, can't or is unwilling, that the city will cooperate in this uploading, because this is to your advantage, I think. This is the neglect of High Park has gone on too long, that and the province needs to take their own responsibility here, because this is not good for the, by the time we see the damage, true damage of High Park, it would be too late, and I would like to avoid the city to be being sued by the province, because that's how this works. I think it's unfair for the city personally to have been given this responsibility, which they never, I think you never understood it, and maybe it's not understandable. Jennifer Keesmaat, when I confronted her about 4 years ago, she said she didn't know it was Manzi, she didn't know that it was downloaded, and she said it's impossible. And I think it's impossible too, that a provincially designated land is downloaded. And the former commissioner, Gord Miller, also, when asked, he said, no, it's not downloaded, that's not possible. So maybe we fix the situation so that both the province and the city can jointly protect High Park. I think that is a very the right thing, and that's how it should have always been. And I hope that when I ask for this at this juncture, when the study's coming to completion, that they will see that this is the right thing to do at this point. That this study becomes worth something. I think the study is not worth very much without the provincial government's cooperation on this to protect its own ANZI. It designated this in '89, and it meant to protect this for the citizens of Toronto, and it's a unique. This used to be, lots of Ontario used to be a oak savanna like this, and this is a very good example. And to have this in our city, for people to come to see, is remarkable. And this kind of intensification going on can only degrade this, and so that the reason that this was designated may not be around in the future.
Please wrap up.
Yes. Anyway, tomorrow is another day, and maybe we have a change.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, our next speaker, Leslie Gooding. Ms. Gooding? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. And this is my opportunity to say heartfelt thanks to the planners. They have done an amazing job in recognizing that a tower in the park is actually a very highly functioning neighborhood, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to say thank you. I did mention when I came up before that I'm very, very concerned about the requirement that to ensure that the natural heritage is protected for the long term. And that affects the lands adjacent, no development or site alteration unless it has been shown that there is no negative impact, and the negative impacts are on High Park. Reiterate the urgency of upgrading the management plan to the level of the provincial standard in the Natural Heritage Reference Manual. I also have an opportunity to make another point. A speaker before me mentioned infiltration, which is in the character area study. Within High Park is Grenadier Pond. Grenadier Pond gets half its water from groundwater and half of its water from surface water. Spring Creek, there are plant communities around there that get their water from largely from groundwater, and there are seeps in the area. The quality and quantity of water is something that planning authorities shall, that little word shall again, shall protect. They protect, improve, or restore. This is PPS 2.2.1. By maintaining linkages and related functions among groundwater features, hydrologic functions, natural heritage features and areas, and surface water features, including shoreline areas. Well, we don't have shoreline areas, but we have all the others. And there is no adjacency to this policy as there is to 2.1, which is the no development in the lands adjacent. So I am really pleased to see that in protecting the unencumbered lands, the OPA provision contributes to meeting the requirements of the PPS. Okay. You've heard from me, I'll stop.
Seeing none. Next speaker, Judy Brian.
Oh, good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you to the councillors. And I highly admire the planning department on this project. It's been fantastic. And I also very impressed with the community. My time in High Park goes back to about 1980, and we moved into Gothic Avenue, and that's where we went with our little son when we became Canadians. We also bought a house on Lincoln Avenue, and we now currently own a house on Clendenin with our son, where he lives with our granddaughter, who I could not imagine busing, which wasn't exactly why I came up to talk, but I wanted to thank School Board. It is very unusual to see them here. My background, I went to U of T and completed my architectural education and came out as a graduate from U of T. I also worked for a number of years in Toronto. We were living in London, Ontario, as a little byway for 20 years. During that time, because I was so upset about things that were going on with the trees and the aquifers and things like that, I became a city councillor. I became the downtown city councillor, brought in a number of things I think helped improve our community. With the help of communities like these, the input was fantastic. I've been to some of these meetings and the input's been great, and I really have to thank them and admire them. I want to just say, please, all of you, every one of us, whether we're citizens, communities, councillors, elected positions, paid, really hard-working civil servants in any of the departments, the provincial policy statement is imperative that we follow. We would not have a beautiful Toronto had we not had the ravines before us to lay down these water tracks and these green spaces that we all enjoy. Who hasn't walked up one of the ravines or one of the rivers or gone to a park? A little remnant of this would be Lithuanian Park, which is right outside my window where I hear the children playing. If it hadn't been a great big hollow in a lake, we probably would not have a green space there. So it behoves us now, since we've become builders of the land and builders of the city, we must imperatively save, at our peril, I should say, as much green space as we can, whether it's on the top of a parking building, which is awkward. However, it's now part of the green spaces. And believe me, the birds, the moths, the butterflies, the bumblebees, whatever they are, they don't know the boundaries. The hawk that sits in the tree at my son's house on Clendenin would not be there if it wasn't for High Park. High Park is a tiny park. It's actually smaller than Central Park. And look what's in the middle of downtown New York. So please be mindful of the importance of the bigger picture. And I'm really glad this has come forward. I live at 255 Clendenin. And Clendenin? That's the name of it, isn't it? Clendenin. Glen Lake. Sorry. I knew I had it wrong, but that's where I live. So I'm in this district. I've lived here too long. But that goes to see that I never dreamt when we moved on to Gothic that I would be looking to age in place in the community that I have put down roots and spent a lot of time. We're very, very fortunate, and we're only fortunate to have such a beautiful city because of the water system. The original ravines gave us this legacy. We must protect it, even if it's no longer virgin or original or heritage. It has become part of the green system. And even if it was man-made green space on top of the ravine or in the ravine system, it's now become part of it. And that's why we have still so many birds and different kinds of trees and things like that. But it's precious and it's vulnerable, and we also don't want to bust our kids out of this beautiful little space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for the Councillor? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next speaker, Dion Arey, Voodoo. Did I get that right? Voodoo? No? Any further speakers to the item before we bring it into committee? It's the last opportunity to speak. Seeing none. Questions of staff. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cresswell, I just want to explore for a moment one of the deputants made reference to including an age provision in our OPA amendment. First of all, my understanding is that when applications are evaluated by the planning department, we typically ask the question and get assurance from the school board that in fact there is sufficient capacity to accommodate a particular development. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct, Councillor. When individual development applications come in, they are circulated to all the school boards for their commentary and response. Yes.
Okay. If in fact a community believes that, for whatever reason, that that's not an accurate statement, and that includes the school board, chooses to appeal an application on the basis of inadequate infrastructure in place, they could appeal to the new land tribunal body, whatever it's called now. I used to know it as the OMB.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think you were right, Councillor. It would have to be couched in the terms of being inconsistent with the PPS and not complying with the growth plan, and you could craft an argument around inappropriate infrastructure to accommodate the development and not meeting those policies, but yes, you could do that.
Okay. And when it was in the hands of the land tribunal, they could in fact, if they agreed with the local community, essentially place a holding provision on that particular application. That is to say, give it approval subject to the holding provision that the individual made reference to, rather than have us put it in as a condition in our OPA amendment. We could leave it to the appeal body to impose it when they felt it was necessary.
That's an interesting question. Part of it, I guess, is a bit of a legal question about whether they would have the ability to do that under the Planning Act. Do you want to weigh in on this, Amanda?
At that particular point in time. So the appeal body could not approve a development on the basis of, by imposing a hold. Make it subject to conditions being satisfied. So they would refuse it rather than approve it with conditions? You think they would refuse it? Okay. Depending on the evidence that was presented, that could be a possibility. All right, thank you.
Councillor Mamali, you had a question.
Sorry, so the city can't put a hold on this for the reasons outlined by the lawyer for TDSB?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, the city council can certainly use a hold in the official plan SASP policy should it desire to do so. I think the challenge in this instance is, quite frankly, that this is a significantly late request. This came in about 6 o'clock last night. We have not really had the chance to fulsomely sit down and look at this, so it's problematic from that regard. I'd also note that we actually have a holding provision in the city's overall official plan.
Right, but...
And so just let me finish. I think the other challenge to this is that the deputy suggested that this was encoded within the Young Eglinton secondary plan, and our quick read of it is not. I believe the school board has asked for it to be encoded in the Young Eglinton. It speaks to community services, but it doesn't speak to schools.
Okay.
And so this is the challenge, and quite frankly, we've had a very brief conversation with our policy staff who are suggesting...
I only get a few minutes.
Yep.
I know that we all love to do this, but I get the point. But if we were able to put a hold on it, wouldn't we be able then to speak, especially on the larger kind of developments, to developers that really want to be able to develop with density, an ability for them to contribute to new schools, if it were part of our holding provisions?
Honestly, Councillor, I think the challenge around that is you're putting a holding provision in place for a funding mechanism that's controlled by the province that the city has no control over, and that's a fundamental challenge.
So much of what's been talked about here is really above and beyond what we could be doing as a local council.
I would fundamentally agree with you with regards to the school board's request.
And wouldn't it make it easier, and this is not a political question, I'm asking a very specific question. Wouldn't it be easier for us as a council if we actually had the school boards uplifted to us? So in other words, we'd have control. Wouldn't it be easier to deal with these kinds of issues if we had direct control of the schools as well?
I'm not sure that's a planning question, Councillor.
Should I ask?
I think that's a question you could ask yourself and perhaps the mayor.
That's John Campbell.
No, I didn't finish. My next question is just with respect to the closing of schools, and the school board regularly makes decisions to close schools. And there's a pecking order. Where are, in terms of who was interested in those schools, where are we on that pecking order? In other words, who do they have to give it to before they give it to the city?
I believe that it starts with the other school boards. I think Councillor Campbell is correct. It starts with the other school boards, and it talks to about cities and agencies and things along those lines.
Private schools as well first?
Honestly,
before us?
No, I think it's public. I think it's public schools first.
Right, and then after the public schools, then there's a pecking order, is there not? We're like fourth or fifth on the list, aren't we, as a city?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head, Councillor.
Does anybody know?
Regulation 444.
I love my colleagues, but most of the time you're wrong.
Okay, no one can answer the question, Councillor Manley.
So, my point is, the school board's being forced to close down many of these schools if they don't agree on the funding formulas that the province gives to them. So how is it that we can help? Should we not be saying we're interested in all schools for the future then? Or why are we saying no to schools? I love my colleagues, but they're wrong most of the time. Staff can't answer?
No, can't answer it. All right, okay. Councillor Holiday's question.
So through you to staff, just along the lines of the questions that I asked the speaker from the school board, what's our practice around including information about school capacity in the council reports versus the body of work that goes into a planning application? And is there a way to have the point made front and center about capacity, or should we do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I think the deputant's point about the school board becoming more aggressive is a good point. Up until very recently, all we would get would be, we're over capacity, please put signs up and put it in the purchase and sales agreement, and that was it. Taking a more aggressive stance and providing the city with a greater ability to say the infrastructure is not there, if we're inclined to say no because of that aspect, I think is really helpful. I know that we have collectively got a team, a city team that's working with the school board on working through a lot of these issues. And so the notion of utilizing holds until school capacity is available in high growth areas, frankly, I think this is a citywide issue. I don't think it is something that we should be contemplating in this instance, because frankly, I don't think it helps in the current instance where you have, first of all, 2 development applications under appeal to the board, where the school board did not step forward and say that there are capacity issues, don't approve these. I don't think it will help in terms of the current policy framework that's in front of you today, because you already have the ability to do that through the overall holding bylaw within the holding policies within the overall official plan anyway. So taking that as background, it's problematic at this point in time to start putting a phasing policy in place to say until the school board gets its funding from the province, development cannot happen in this area. I think that is a very challenging position for council to take.
No, but I'd go just a little further backwards and say, is there appetite or utility in giving the question of school board capacity more prominence in the planning reports that are before us, especially in light of the comments at the beginning of the meeting about the city council's documentation being an important part of the LPAT process? Right,
and I think that it's a good observation, Councillor. I think that given the new planning regime that we find ourselves in terms of talking about the PPS and the growth plan in a more robust way than we had previously, I think these are the kinds of issues that will sort of come up over the next, I don't know, 6 to 8 months to a year, as we start to learn exactly what matters of provincial interest are of significant importance to the City of Toronto through council decisions and through challenges at the board. I think it's a good point to take forward in our deliberations on how we recraft our staff reports about school capacity issues and the concerns about closures in one ward and overcapacity in another ward, and how that's handled in terms of a financial matter. So I think it's actually quite a good point to raise the prominence of that in the staff reports, because yes, what we do right now, because up until, as the deputy said, up until I guess the end of last year, we got a very basic rubber stamp thing, so it got tucked in at about page 15 or 20 of the staff report. If it is a matter of substantive interest on individual development applications, it should be advanced and discussed in the realm of the new planning policies.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You told me you had no questions.
Well, I guess my question for Mr. Cresswell is that in this report, can you just highlight 3 of the key ingredients that have been undertaken to protect the current neighborhood, or the key substantive, recommendations from this that are being brought forward?
Well, there's quite a number of them, but I think as a number of the deputants have mentioned, recognizing the existing open spaces between the buildings is really important. It's a key definitive characteristic of this community. Also, recognizing its tie to High Park is extremely important, and recognizing that the development in this community has to recognize that it is adjacent to High Park. I also think that the third thing is the built form policies in Section 5, recognizing that if you are looking at, typically when we look at taller buildings, we talked about point towers and talking about floor plates and quickly moving shadows. In this community, that built form is not an appropriate built form, so we've really tried to massage the built form policies to reflect the character of the area, so that it provides a great level of definitiveness as proponents are looking at new development to reflect on the character of the community when they bring forward their proposals.
So in regard to the open space, the green space, are you referring to those green spaces that are on apartment lands already, where there's an apartment building and it's the surrounding land? Because that's where our policy provides for infill housing that consumes that land.
And that's why the policy, as one of the deputies pointed out, speaks to 65% open space on development application sites, because that's very much reflective of the existing character. And again, you take a step back to what we're doing here is we want to bring forward a policy regime that is reflective of the existing character, which we think is functioning quite well. You've heard the residents here talking about it today. The reason why they chose to live in this area is because of the character of the community. So the official plan provides policy at a very high level, and so what we've done is we've delved down into it to create a greater level of specificity around what we believe the open space character should be, what the built form character should be, how the natural heritage of the area should be respected, the walking paths through the community should be respected. So it's all those kinds of specific level of details that find its way into the SASP.
And just the last follow-up is, it's in regard to this notion of a holding provision because there's not enough accommodation for schools. I mean, is that really any different than in other communities where they would object to development because of traffic concerns and that the roads are already clogged? We would never put a holding provision on because our streets cannot accommodate more traffic.
That's not necessarily the case, Councillor.
Has that happened?
So I'm certainly familiar of a couple of them where we have used holding provisions in the zoning bylaw, for example. But again, we provide those provisions in the zoning bylaw because we know there's a level of specificity. We also know that there is a way out that the city controls to take the H off. In this case of school capacity, my commentary is I think it's challenging for the city to suggest that we could use an H to control school capacity when the city nor the applicant holds the key to taking the H off. That's the challenge.
Got it, thank you. Councillor Doucette, the question.
I just have one very quick question of staff. Where do we go from today? What happens when everyone does this unanimous vote to support this recommendation?
Then
they weren't listening to me. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, then the policy recommendations, if they're endorsed by Community Council, move forward to City Council. I think the meeting is June 23rd, for approval by City Council. Correct. And then, as the staff report suggests, we will use these recommendations and these policy directives to bring forward the staff reports on the two significant applications in this area, and our intention is we are targeting those reports for the July 4th Community Council.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions, Councillor Doucette, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will be moving the staff recommendations, obviously, but I want to start again by thanking the community. We've had so many speakers come out today, and thank you for being patient and going for lunch and coming back. We appreciate that. This report wouldn't be the report it is without your input, and particularly to the working group. When we signed the working group up, we told you there'd be 3 meetings, maybe 4. We had 6. And you know what? People came out, and they kept giving us input, and we gave you homework. We gave you homework to get back to us anywhere from 4 to 7 days. And you always came back to us. You promoted the online data we wanted from the community to say, how do you use this land? Where do you use this land? And all that data gathered went to our three most amazing ladies possible, Elizabeth, Alison, and Jennifer. And Mr. Cresswell, they do need a day off. They put this report together so quickly, but very carefully, listening to everyone's input, considering what planning can and cannot do, but thinking outside the box at the same time. So as councillors, we have before us over nearly 50 emails here from residents showing their support to what we have before us today. We don't normally get that many emails in support. We usually get it when they're not supporting, but not when you're in support of something. So I thank you also for doing that for us today. Hyde Park Alliance, you're brilliant. You've come together as a group, originally for a slightly different reason, for some proposals, but you've also been out at our working group meetings. You've engaged your hundreds of residents, not just the tenants in the buildings, not just the local residents, but everyone in the community to get involved. And as I say, we need that. These studies wouldn't be the studies they are without the input. One of the things we heard again, as you heard through the Bloor West Avenue study, which is the reason I asked the Avenue study to come first, because that did start first, and a lot of the information we were able to research there has come into this report. Hyde Park, we never want to do anything which will affect or damage Hyde Park. It's the jewel of our city, the lungs of our city, we know that. And we heard loud and clear, and staff heard loud and clear. And this is actually why this report wasn't before us a few months ago, because we were also, the same as the Avenue study, waiting for input from research, from the experts giving us the research towards this. Open space was one of the biggest things we heard. Tower in the park, a successful tower in the park, built in the early 60s. And these buildings were built the way they were to make it work, to give us green space, to give us trees, to give us light, to give us sky views, to give us birds sitting on a tree outside your window. If we don't move a report which carefully considers what could be built, we as a community are going to lose that. One of the most fascinating things we heard, and I think was most fascinating, and the design review panel, this has been twice to the design review panel, they thought was fascinating, was that graph which shows not just where the buildings are, but what's underground. How many underground garages are actually almost to property lines? And we as councillors know, if you've got a high-rise apartment building, every 40, 50, 60 years, they decimate the trees because they have to fix that membrane of their garage. That is why it is important on new development not to allow underground garages to go right to the property and the street line. We want to be able to plant bigger trees, mature trees, which won't be cut down every 50 years. That again is why people moved into this part of the neighborhood. One good part is one of the developers used to lease a piece of property south of their property, north of Bloor Street, and they built a tennis court on it. A quarter of a tennis court is on their private property, 3/4 of a tennis court is now on city property. Right now, that piece of land is going to be kept as passive green space until we have a meeting with the community to say what would you like to do on that passive green space. Maybe more benches. There was a gentleman here this morning asking just for more benches so you can sit and enjoy peace and quiet. Throw a frisbee, throw a soccer ball. The community was asking also through this whole process, and I will just add, on the working group, we did have the developers. We did have property owners on the working group. The community was saying, though, we do actually want family-sized units. We want to build so families can come to our community. On the other hand, we heard that our schools are at capacity. As you heard me say, Kiel had an addition a few years ago. I think it was at least 12 classrooms were built. Thanks to the province, they gave us funding to do that. We're not getting any more additions now because we've had ours. So we do consider TDSB. They are on the internal working group. They are parties at the OMB hearings for the 2 developments you'll be hearing about next month. I'm beginning to give them the wrap-up sign. But I do just want to thank everyone. Yes, every development which has come into our ward, as long as I've been councillor, TDSB has said your child may be bust. Catholic School Board we don't hear as much from. They sometimes are able to accommodate their children. They don't do quite so much busing. So I thank the TDSB for stepping up to the plate, getting more involved. We need you at the table with us to help us. But most of all, thank you to the community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's hope we can get a unanimous vote for this report before us today.
Councillor Mammalidi to speak.
Who's your local MPP now?
Don't have one right now. Sherry Denova was our MPP. She did step down. She did look to reform the OMB and health.
So it's, I needed to ask because it's going to be part of my dialogue. I'm going to support this because I think it's needed. I think every community should go through this process, and I think nothing should be built until each community goes through its own process with respect to planning. We've done it in York West. It's taken all of 20 years to start seeing changes in York West, but it's happening. And it only happens when people want to invest in your community. In a community like mine, the property values are very low, and we don't often get the developers coming knocking on our doors to want to develop, so some of us want them to do that, and it becomes very difficult. But it's easier to do once you establish the guidelines that everybody needs to go through. So I do commend all of you who were part of this, including the councillor who's driven this, for going through this process. Having said that, many of you asked for a lot of money. I listened to you earlier, and I'm going to say come up with your own formula to find that money, because a guy like me who gets no money at all in my ward can't say, yeah, let's do all these renovations to everything under the sun in someone else's pocket when the city's telling us we have no money for even swing sets in our own community. So I need to just let people know that there's a clear difference between votes and the logic and the reasons why. So that's important. When Doug Ford becomes the premier of this province, I'm hoping that things will change, and I'm hoping that one of them might be to just relinquish and get rid of the school boards completely and allow for the City of Toronto to actually take charge of the schools, where we can start making some real meaningful decisions. We do it with recreation now. We have to enter into recreational agreements with school boards. Let us have control of the schools, and we can make all kinds of decisions at the end of the day that will benefit the local communities, including which buildings we should keep or lease out in case we need them in future years, and which ones we don't. Right now, the school boards are faced with difficult situations and positions. The province says to them, you're funded based on your capacity at 100%, but if you're not at capacity, we're not going to fund you. And so they're faced with having to ship kids and bus them to other schools just to get funding from the provincial government, which is completely ridiculous. I think that the school board's right on this one. There should be some provision there, even though we can't, and I heard that. There should be some provisions there that allow the city to be able to understand the needs of communities when it comes to schools, but it has to come from the provincial government. That's why I asked you who your MPP is, because it is not us. It is not us that have that capability here, folks. And it's not your school board trustee that has that capability. It is the person that's been knocking on your door during this election. It's the provincial government that has to step up to the table and come and save the communities with respect to this sort of thing. And we have to do that together. I understand it. But please don't come here expecting us to be able to do things that we're just not capable of doing legally. Many of the things that you've asked us to do here, we can't because the Act doesn't allow us to do that. And as far as the school board's concerned, you chose to come here today, and I commend you for that, and I thank you for that, and I hope that the school boards show up with every application that comes forward, because it's the only way the province is really going to listen to what's going on, as if we're kind of doing it all together, right? But at the same time, school boards are deciding to let go of their surplus properties that they don't want. They're selling them. They're selling them everywhere. I can give, north of St. Clair, I can give you 2 or 3 that have been sold over the last little while to developers. And now, what happens? After all these years, we give up. What are we going to do? Buy, expropriate land and build in communities that had once a school sitting in its neighborhood? I think we're doing it all backwards. Government needs to start from the bottom up, not from the top down. And until we get that straight, this stuff is just gonna continue. So, first step, Doug Ford, get rid of the school boards, let us run them, and maybe we can do a better job of dealing with community and local issues.
Councillor Nunziata to speak.
Yeah, just briefly, first, want to thank the local councillor and residents that are here on actually, both of them, 31.4 and 31.5. It's really gonna make a difference along Blue or West. I'm just hoping, in my area, we have St. Clair Avenue, and which is in very much need of revitalization and intensification, and in Mount Dennis, where I have all storefronts, vacant storefronts with people living in them with curtains. I hope that the staff spend as much time in Mount Dennis and St. Clair that they have here, because that is an area that really needs attention, and so I'm looking forward to that. We have the GO station, we have the Up Express, we have transportation. We just need the staff to step up and pay attention to these areas. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Seeing none. No motions are moved. Councillor Doucette's moved the staff recommendation. She wants a recorded vote, I'm sure. All in favor? Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holiday, Councillor Mamalidi, and Trustee Councillor Campbell. That is unanimous. Unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your patience today, and thanks for all coming out today. Okay. Moving right along as the room clears out, we'll do a quick release. Any quick releases?
Mr. Chair.
Okay, hang on. Councillor Doucette, quick release?
I hate to do this. I have to add something to the agenda, and I can do a quick release at the same time.
Hang on.
Do you want to hang on?
Oh, relax. Hang.
Okay, before you add it, I think we have to come.
Sorry? Do you want to add it or not? Yes or no? Okay. Councillor DeGiorgio, quick release.
Item EY 31.47, Mr. Chairman, these are all staff recommendations.
One second.
EY 31.48. These are added items that we accepted earlier.
31.48?
And 47.
Hold on. Okay, so EY 47 added to speed humps on Scott Road, Cruz Avenue.
Just asking for a poll.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed to 47.
He's opposed.
Okay, carried. Parking amendments, Densely Avenue between Sheffield Street and the north-south branch of Densely Avenue. This is the report request. What is this? 48? Councillor DeGiorgio, what are you doing with 48?
Parking.
I'm moving 48, yeah.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. EY 31.26.
Sorry, 31.26?
Traffic calming of Rosemount
26?
Avenue. 26.
Okay, 1 second, please.
I have
Traffic calming Rosemount Avenue between Dufferin Street and Greenlaw Avenue.
and I would like to move the alternate recommendations within the report.
Moving the ultimate recommendations in the report to install the speed humps.
Yes.
All in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Carried. Is that it, Councillor Palacio?
I have another one, EY 31.9,
31.9.
and that's...
Hold on, Councillor Palacio, please.
And I have recommendations.
We have a speaker on that. Okay, we have a speaker on that. Anybody else quick releases? Okay, seeing none, we'll go back to our regular scheduled program, which is 31.17, application for fence exemption, 854 Weston Road. Are there any speakers on Weston Road? Thank you, sir. Thank you for your patience. Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Jay Smith, 2814 Hollington Crescent, Mississauga. We met with Councillor Nunziata of City staff. It was deferred from the last hearing in May. We are asking for a fence height exemption to 2.4 meters in height. We asked last time for 3.2, so we've dropped it significantly. The height on the neighbor's side, due to an elevation change in grade, would be 2 meters on the neighbor's side to the north. So his side would be keeping within the height, but because of the change in grade, because of the sloping terrain of the property, it would be 2.4 meters on 854 Weston. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Leedy can't leave. Councilmember Leedy, sorry, we need you for quorum. Okay, well, I need you, can't leave right now. Okay. Okay, thank you. Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none, Councillor, questions of staff? Councillor Nunziata.
Okay, I do have a motion. This was the one that was, deferred from the last meeting, that we all agreed was ugly.
Okay, let's go, come on.
Put the motion on the screen.
We call Councillor Campbell back in.
Okay, just
Yeah,
relax.
I think we sent it to you.
We have a motion or no?
It's not up there.
Okay, can you maybe just read what it is?
Yeah, do you have it? Okay, yeah, so, for the 200, yeah, okay,
You're granting the exemption.
yeah, with the 2 point, whatever it is. Okay, you've got that, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all in favor?
No, hold on, I just want to speak on it, just for a minute.
Okay, George, you go. George?
She wants to speak against her motion.
Here, do you want the motion here?
The motion's on the screen, we have it.
Oh,
We have it,
you
it's on the screen.
Okay, so I did attend, and, what the owner did do, they removed all the plywood off the fence because that was on previously. And so, it aesthetically, it looks a lot nicer now than it did last month. But when I did get there, it looks like the owner did an extension to the house without a permit. And so there was a stop work order, and that application now has to go to the Committee of Adjustment, so that's gonna be another issue for me. But, as far as the fence, they're complying with the bylaw, and so I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, motion's on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 31.18, application for fences on 18 Riviera Drive. Are there speakers on Riviera Drive? Yes, sir, please come forward. Thank you for your patience. Welcome, you have 5 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Sure, Michael Pisani, 18 Riverley Drive. After having built a pool fence enclosure and abiding by all those rules, one of the fences was too low, as municipal licensing had stated. So I had gotten a lattice to increase it, and apparently, after discussing it with the neighbor to the back, we had agreed to just have it straight across as opposed to a stagger. And as I found out later on, it was between 12 and perhaps 18 centimeters too high. On the docket there was a signed letter from the neighbor to the back, Gary, who said it looks wonderful. He agreed it and thinks it looks great.
Great, thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Any further speakers to this item? Questions of staff? Questions of staff? Seeing none? On behalf of Councillor Ford, I'll be moving the alt recommendation to grant the application. Well, there's two. So, we're moving number 2 to grant the application? Sorry, okay. So I'm moving, or Councillor Campbell's moving to grant the exemption. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. 3139, update on request to strengthen tree protection enforcement in Long Branch. We have a couple speakers. Judy Gibson. Is Judy not here? Oh, there, sorry. Yeah, no, I know, absolutely. Yep, please come forward. So Judy, you're not speaking? Oh, you're okay. Okay.
Hello, my name is Christian Mercado. I'm the chair of the Long Branch Neighborhood Association. I do have a presentation. I'm just going to need some IT help here.
1 second, I'll put your time on hold. I'm going to reset it. How about that?
Panic. Yeah, I'm just, Yep, that's the one. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'll restart your time.
Okay, thank you. My name is Christy Mercado. I live at 11 Atherton Crescent. I'm the chair of the Long Branch Neighborhood Association. I just wanted to first of all, thank Councillor Grimes for actually generating this report, and the Forestry Department for actually contributing and making this report possible. And I would also like to thank Dr. Max Dita for his involvement in attending TLAB hearings as an expert witness to advocate for protecting our trees in Long Branch. So the LBNA has decided to present today to make sure that this council is aware of the devastation and urgency on this report. Residents feel that the Long Branch canopy is unique and mature, but it's also a resource that needs to be managed and protected. So from living in the area, this is what we see on the ground that actually contribute to loss. So not many people don't know about the emerald ash borer beetle, and unfortunately we have a lot of ash trees down in Long Branch, particularly on Ash Crescent. We do thank the city for actually trying to treat these trees and protect them. However, all they've done is that they've just extended their life. Unfortunately, the end result is the same. So you end up with the green dot to say that it's been treated, but eventually that green dot turns to orange. And at least we can start managing and start replanting. But these trees are like 80 to 120 years old, so eventually the result ends up being the same. So also, we've got storm damage. So we all pretty much remember the ice storm of a few years ago. But just as recently as last month, there was a significant windstorm that blew through Toronto and took down what we could count on public and private property, 12 spruce trees in Long Branch. So these, again, are significant trees that are anywhere between 70 and 80 years old, all on public and private lands. And they just quite simply blew over. So this is something that it happens, okay? You can't really do much about it except try and keep your trees healthy and maintain them so perhaps that they can actually stand up to storms like such. Now, these are the things that we can't really control. So let's talk about the things that we can control. So our big thing down there is development. We have Long Branch has actually become a choice location for developers to come in and do the practice of lot severing, where they're doing intensification in neighborhoods. Now, everything is legal and it goes through the Committee of Adjustment and the OMB and quite recently TLAB. However, the thing is that the tree protection zones are not sufficient as far as protecting our mature tree canopy in Long Branch. And the on-ground anecdotal evidence is quite obvious. So we have 73 and 75 Ash Crescent. These trees were protected. Okay, these trees died. Okay, and these are two trees that ended up coming down. They actually came down last summer. 75 25th. This is one of the first lot severances that occurred in Long Branch on 27th Street. And again, this was actually this was protected as part of the OMB ruling, and it didn't survive. So it actually came out last summer. And you can see it took about 2 years to die, and you can see its reduced crown, defoliation, and weak foliage. So, and this is what's there now. Okay, we've got 2 and 4 27th Street. Okay, this is one of the big ones that really ticked off the residents. Okay, where this ended up resulting in several fines, where this tree the 7 large evergreens were taken out. So that's the after picture of what was left over. Those were private trees. And then you can see the big silver maple in the front, and that's what's left now. So you can see the tree stump, and as you can see right now, there was no rot. That was a very healthy tree. And now what's left is, unfortunately, the residents actually bought the house because of the tree. So its twin is actually across the street. So this silver maple was the twin, and it's still there right now. And as you can see, one house, it was developed actually a couple of years ago, and one house was built, and tree protection actually happened. There was tree removal, however, it was done sensitive and with the neighbors' consent, and this tree is still thriving. So it is possible, but plantable space becomes a real thing when you're actually trying to do development around trees. And that's why we're actually saying that our tree protection isn't going far enough. So, what do we do now? So, these are our new summer students. This is Henry and Natalie.
You're out of time. You're out of time.
I'm out of time.
Yeah, but I'll try and get something out of you.
Okay.
So, any questions of the deputy? Councillor Campbell?
So thank you very much for that, because that is, I've never seen that, and you know, you hear about tree protection, and it's supposed to be there, but I haven't seen that it actually doesn't work, and trees do die as a result of this. So how, I mean, you showed a few examples, how prevalent is that down in Long Branch?
Severance, it happens all the time.
The death of trees.
The death of trees, and the thing is that it happens over a series of seasons. So between the point in time where the application is approved and then the building goes up, like all the permits and everything are got, the building goes up, and then it comes, and then sometimes the builders have actually lived in it for a year, and the building is bought, and then the new owners don't have a tree. So it's within a 3 or 4 year span, but it's pretty much 100%.
So in terms of, if you could make a recommendation in regard to tree protection, when a house is being built, what would it be?
Well, there needs to be some sort of examination on what would be, because there have been also instances where trees have been protected in that last storm. A tree actually that was being protected actually blew over.
A lot of trees blew over, though.
Yeah, they do blow over, but the thing is once you dig through that compacted soil, the thing is the footprint is so big on the house when you're building two, that the compact of the soil and the trees are so old, they need so much support. So this is the thing, is that a tree of that size needs significant support. So the tree, I think probably a place to start would be that the zones would have to be bigger.
That's what I was thinking you were going to say.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions for you. So you've spelled out pretty well the questions I was going to ask you. You would agree that we're under siege with the development, so we're not just losing trees to bad weather and major storms. The development
for sure
is really costing us a lot of trees. And could you tell us about that last slide you were just about to tell us about?
Okay, so yes, absolutely. Henry and Natalie, they're posing with Professor Daniela Milanovic. She's a professor with the University of Toronto, Faculty of Forestry. And what the Long Branch Neighborhood Association did was we got a grant from Canada Summer Jobs, and we've hired 2 summer students to actually do a tree inventory in Long Branch. So this is going to be an inventory of public and private trees. So the students have actually been trained by the professor, and they now can measure trees, they can ID different species, and they can also identify and describe general tree health. So we're getting permissions from landowners where the university students will be going on and actually counting trees. We can get a real idea, because from the information that was available for this report, it's actually a little bit dated. So what we're doing is we've actually employed people to actually get a real true picture of what state of the canopy is and what state it is in comparison to the city's goal as far as our strategic forestry management plan. So that information will begin to be available at the end of the summer, and then we're looking at probably spilling it over into next summer, and we're also going to be working with master students for the University of Toronto, and they'll be making a forestry management plan for us.
Was there any other slides there that we didn't see that you'd like to maybe tell us what, no? Are we good?
Well, fortunately, this is why Judy and I come to these things together.
Great. Thank you. You have a question by Councillor, Councillor Nunn, you had a question?
Thank you. So the report that we have before us is just to move receipt of the report. So there's been meetings with planning and forestry for this report? Right. So was it not discussed with planning and forestry that in future, when there's, for example, committee of adjustment applications come in and there's a comment from forestry that to approve the application with condition that they protect the tree, right? Trees on the property, and in fact that's not being done. So there should there not be a stronger recommendation from planning and forestry when these applications go to the committee of adjustment?
I would agree. It comes down to, and we've spoken to all these people that you're speaking to, and it really comes down to everybody wants to protect the trees. But the thing is I think they feel a little bit bound by policy, and the order of where trees fall in, where tree management falls into the planning process. So inevitably buildings trump trees, and the thing is what we want is for them all to be considered together as a whole, because trees actually increase the value of properties between 6 and 19%, and they're part of the green infrastructure. So if you have a lot of trees in an area, you actually have trees actually manage a lot of water. They actually scrub a lot of CO out of the air. So to say that, but the thing is that you have to invest in those trees to actually have them old enough to do anything. Yeah. And that's a long cycle to be planning for.
Yeah. Because I know that I have a number of applications in my ward where they're severing properties and building, and residents are against the application, and they're coming because there happens to be a tree on the property, trees on the property. And the application still gets approved because comments from forestry is, well, you need to protect these trees, but we will support your application. I think it should be a little stronger.
Yeah,
right?
we don't get that from our comments as from forestry, is that they don't support. So they do make suggestions not to support. However, if it's approved, then they will issue a permit, and that's how it goes. That's the circle.
I get the opposite. Okay.
I'm sorry, Councillor.
Great, thank you. Judy Gibbs. Good afternoon, Judy. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Judy Gibbs. I'm the Vice Chair of the Long Branch Neighborhood Association and also the Chair of the Tree Canopy Preservation and Enhancement Committee. And we appreciate the report. As Christine said, we appreciate the report that is before Council, and thank Councillor Grimes for asking for it. And we appreciate in there the data in the report about the planting of the trees that are happening in Ward 6. And the Long Branch Neighborhood Association also obtained a grant from Tree for Me, which is through the Toronto Parks and Trees Foundation. And we planted almost 300 trees. So that's the most successful event to date for that event. But planting trees is not enough to get to the 40% tree canopy that we want to get to. In the report, it refers to data that's from 2007, that we have a tree canopy of 26% in Long Branch. As Christine showed, we're far below that now because of all the insects and the weather and the development that's happening. So that goal of 40% was set in 2004, and we're actually below it now. So that's not successful. So we need to better protect the existing healthy trees. And some of the recommendations that we have, we actually only got the report last week, so we didn't have a chance to speak to forestry or the councillor about it. But we do have additional recommendations beyond this committee just receiving the report. One of the things is that we would recommend that the Committee of Adjustment be made aware of their low rate relative to other Committee of Adjustments of following forestry's recommendation for denial. So when forestry writes a report recommending denial of an application, we would request that the Committee of Adjustment take that and give it stronger weight when they're making decisions at a Committee of Adjustment. Secondly, we would request that as part of the study that the Forestry Department is doing to look at the tree canopy in 2018, we would ask the staff also to analyze the specific impact of tree loss, since 2007 on the lots that were approved for severance in Long Branch to see the correlation between the loss of trees on severed properties versus other applications. Thirdly, we would ask that while that study is underway, that there be more stringent measures put in place to be a vehicle to prevent further destruction. And some of the examples, and these are just examples, I just polled some of the residents, and this is what they came back with. They said taking down a tree should require a permit that's based on the size of the tree. So the more mature the tree is, the greater the permit. So the bigger the size, the bigger the cost associated with taking that tree down. That way, it would encourage applicants to make it a priority to preserve the existing trees, which is outlined in the policy of the official plan, which is policy 3.1.2, which is preserving existing mature trees wherever possible. If the fines and the permits were related to that, then that would encourage that more often. Other examples that people gave is that in the case of injuring a private tree, the builder should be required to post a bond in case there's future damage. And if there are no street trees, we would ask that street trees be planted on the property and that the builder bear the cost. And also, finally, that new builds should be required to preserve plantable space because, again, that's so key. If trees do have to come down, and trees do have a life, they do have to come down occasionally, but there'd be plantable space for large trees so that they can grow and that they can thrive. So those are our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Doucette?
Going to be a bit of are you aware of, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So a lot of the report is connected to Committee of Adjustment.
Yes.
Are you aware that a couple of months ago we had a report come to Parks and Environment about how forestry works with Committee of Adjustment, or Committee of Adjustment should work with forestry? In that report, I moved a motion for 9 items, and it all pertains to some of the things you're talking about. So are you aware we've actually asked that on every drawing we get for Committee of Adjustment, the proponent has to identify trees?
I wasn't aware, but I have seen them on the drawings, yes.
Some do, some don't.
Okay.
We have also asked that, because we have an election coming up, as we heard from Councillor Mamaliti, even though I'm talking about a further election in October, after the election, are you aware that we actually rehire or relook at our Committee of Adjustment panels? And we have asked that one of the criteria, someone on that panel has to have knowledge of forestry.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. That would be fantastic.
Are you also aware that now forestry is going out and doing workshops for our Committee of Adjustment panels, talking about the private tree bylaw and explaining how important the tree canopy is? So that, I hope, would you agree, might help us when it comes to why a C of A not always acknowledging forestry's report.
I would agree, and I was not aware of many of those things, so thank you. Yeah.
The other thing we're doing also is, you may have noticed in your neighborhood that tree protection isn't always very good around on development sites. Are you aware that we have now asked even building inspectors to identify if the tree protection is up or not, or not being adhered to, and we've asked that they report to forestry rather than having to have forestry go and inspect every single tree.
Okay.
So hoping that will help. The last, are you aware, is when someone does have to plant a tree, a replacement tree, we have asked that that person has to report back at the 2-year mark with a photograph of the tree, so forestry will also know that the tree has been planted, rather than having to send a staff person out who doesn't always get there. So the tree replacement actually will be adhered to now.
Okay.
So,
are you aware of that?
I'm sorry.
I was aware of that, but can I just make a comment on that last one? Because we actually went with the students to be trained as well at University of Toronto, Forestry Department. And one of the things that I was not aware of, that I am aware of now, is when trees are planted, they get girdling roots sometimes. So it's the quality of the tree that's planted, and it's also the space it's planted in. If it's planted in a space that's heavy clay, and you dig a hole, then those trees' roots will go out, and they'll hit it like hitting a pot. So it's like putting a tree, even though they're planting it, after 2 years it's going to be hitting a pot, and that tree will still never thrive. So I guess, that's not the solution here, but it's one of the things that I wasn't aware of. So those planted trees, they may survive 2 years, but they may never survive into a fully grown tree. So
thank you for all your work.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions of staff? I have questions, staff. It's my ward. Can I ask first?
Sure, yes,
It's my ward. It's my report. Can I ask? Is it mine? Thanks, trustee.
I'm very concerned about it. You wait to the end.
I won't even worry about my trees. Never mind the ward. My good friend Max, how are you? Good. So, I know, as Councilor just stated, that we're, the next term, we're probably gonna have people with forestry experience on, but how do we get the COA to recognize the value of these trees when they come forward? So what we've been doing, we've been fighting everything, most is lot severance, we've been fighting. I know you've been fighting with it, goes off to the board, and now we're starting to see some success. But how do we get the COA, and I guess the answer would be to put some people on with tree experience, is that it?
Yeah, what's happened is the Committee of Adjustment sent the request for comments to Forestry, same thing do the Transportation and other divisions. As soon as we got the request for comments with the proposed variances or proposed consent, then we have staff attend the site and see if the trees are in conflict. So, if the trees that are in conflict with the proposed variances, we normally object, send a very specific standalone memo to the Committee of Adjustment for every single file. I'll show you one, Councilor Nunziata.
No, I know,
And then, all of these memos, by the way, can be found under the Application Information Center, which is under Committee of Adjustment website. They upload all the memos there. So our position is clear. If the tree is healthy, we're objecting the variances and the consent. For the trees that are in poor condition, or there is a workable solution, then we advise them to apply for permit and satisfy forestry. That's happened according to the tree bylaw requirements under Chapter 813, 18B5. So when the project is approved by the Committee of Adjustment, final and binding, or by OMB, Urban Forestry will issue the permit for the tree. For sure, conditional to plant new trees.
Over half the investigations found that the bylaw is being broken, and you saw the pictures up there that the association brought forward, the lot splits, which we've been fighting. We brought the report through here on getting some urban design guidelines. I know everyone here is very familiar with what's happening, Long Branch being under siege with the lot splitting. But you see the association showing these homes when they've been built and the trees are half dead, if not dead. How do we get around? I know it's probably a staffing issue, but what can we do to prevent that?
I think City Council approved last maybe 2 months ago, and we started two years ago having a staff temp position, and now we have a permanent compliance and enforcement group, which they are driving around checking if the tree protection is in place, or you get calls sometime from the community, from the neighborhoods. So staff will go there right away, and they're doing that within 4 or 5 days. So every single case is investigated. Some of them maybe is kind of minimum impact to the trees, so it's something that is not important. Still, we try to educate the property owners and the developers. Some of them that they violated the bylaw, then according to the City Council decision 2015, we charge the contravention fee. We issue a specific order to the owner or developer to comply what tree protection mitigation measures are required.
And what are the fines for, let's say, a 100-year-old tree? What are the fines if you destroy a 100-year-old tree?
The fine is something the court will decide, but as a violation, we charge the contravention fee, and we ask them to replace with the 5 new trees. If we decide to go to the court, then the fine starts from 500 to 100,000 for a tree, according to the tree bylaw.
Okay, so if one of my constituents sees something happening, new lot split has been split, they're digging the hole, they see something happening going to these trees, what's the process? They call?
They call 311 or send an email to 311.
And how quick can we get out there?
Well, now the deadline that almost now is having this team on place is less than 5 days.
So if someone's digging with a backhoe, we're not getting out there for 4 or 5 days. By the time that happens, we try to prioritize. Sometimes it's not really under my section, but it's a compliance and enforcement group. When you get a call from the neighbors or consular office or 311 and you see something is really happening now, even in afternoon we have a standby person in urban forestry who can attend the site. Yeah, but
I'll give a couple.
I think it was 27th Street. With the bottom of 27th Street, a guy went in there and just hacked out 3 major big trees, and by the time we got it's just crazy.
He did that, and by the way, he went in court and he got charged, even as the owner of the trees. We try to do our best. We advise them before starting anything on site. He provided arborist report, but he decided not to implement the tree protection.
What was the fine for that? Do you remember, Max?
I don't remember my own, but it's a 5,000 to 15,000 for a tree that the court decided, for one tree.
Some of these guys just
Top
build,
5 trees to be planted.
and some of these developers just building that into their price line?
We're trying in the same time to educate and implement the bylaw as far as we can with the resources that we have.
Yeah, okay, Max, thank you. You've been fantastic, by the way. Councillor Campbell, the question?
Just two questions. So there is no fine if a tree dies after the fact, is there?
They have a tree protection plan in place. Only, let's say, the cases that we're showing here are the cases that they apply to injure the tree, because they got OMB decision, and then the tree died after that. So we don't know exactly when that died, what are the reasons. So sometimes they have a undertaking and release, which when we issue the permit conditional to protect that tree, they have to implement the tree protection mitigation measures. But some of the developers, they will sell, the property, and a year or after that, we can find there a new owner. So it's really hard to deal case by case.
But if they put in the, tree protection that is, later found to be inadequate and the tree dies because they've come too close to the roots or whatever and they're digging, there's nothing in our power to assess a fine after the fact. Is that correct?
What's happened is first of all, is some misunderstanding or misleading here. If they fully protected the tree, according to the tree protection policy, so 99% the tree is not going to die because of the construction.
Okay.
But what's happened sometime in those cases, they put the tree protection on, they show that they are protecting the tree, they got a permit to injure the tree, and later on they remove the hoarding and they violated or encroach the tree protection zone. For example, they dig within the minimum required tree protection zone. Open the trench, they cut the roots, which we didn't catch at that time. So that's why the tree can die 2 or 3 years later.
So you've got the numbers on page 5 of the report. In 26% of the cases in Etobicoke and 43% of the cases in Ward 6, Urban Forestry requested a denial of the variance or consent to sever because of trees, and only 13% of the time they listen to the forestry people.
This is up to the committee of adjustment.
Yeah, I know it is. So, I mean, are we not sending our most persuasive foresters in front of these guys, or what is the,
Okay, if you want, I can show you a memo just to make sure that what we're sending out. So
we don't send somebody though, do we?
Our staff where?
Do they attend at the Committee of Adjustment?
They do not attend Committee of Adjustment.
Do they in other parts of the city, does forestry attend at the Committee of Adjustment? No, I'm seeing no. Okay.
What's happened is we attend the site and we send the comments in writing to the Committee of Adjustment prior to public hearing.
I see. Okay.
So they have our comments.
Okay, I don't have any other questions, but I get it, Max.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've seen some.
Deputy Mayor Hawley, the question.
But I've never seen refusal.
Okay, Francis.
There.
Okay.
My ward, you've never done that.
Maybe they are not healthy trees.
Okay, please, let's go.
If you have the addresses, you can go one by one, we can find it.
Max, for me, please. Deputy Mayor Hawley?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Max. One of the things the speaker said was they were concerned with the size of the tree protection zone. And I think I heard you say that you were okay with the city's policies around the tree protection zones, that it was more of a matter of violation, that sometime during the construction period, the bylaws weren't adhered to. Am I correct in that?
Yes, you're correct, Deputy Mayor Holiday. What's happened is the policy has a minimum required tree protection zone.
Right.
So they install the tree protection zone on the site. However, as I said before, after they start construction, sometimes they remove it.
Right, they break the rules.
They're closer to the trunk of the tree. Yep. That's where the violation or the impact to the tree happens.
Okay, so you don't have any advice to us to create larger tree protection zones or further supplement the protections under the bylaw?
I don't have that information for now. We don't have any kind of study or verification that the minimum required tree protection zone is too small, and that's why the trees are dying because of the construction.
Okay. But it seems as though in the vast majority of the cases, provided the rules are followed, the tree has a pretty good likelihood of surviving. I think you said 99%, but I'll take it as very good odds. Do you have any advice to us with respect to a time period at which a tree may die as a result to some transgression to the tree protection zone? Is it 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years?
The tree will show signs of decline 2 years after the construction normally.
2 years.
So two summer seasons after that, then tree will show signs of decline. If something happened to the roots of the tree, then you see tops of the tree, dying back.
So if somebody wanted to do a bond on like a performance bond on the protection of a tree, a 2-year window would be something that's adequate?
I think so, and that's why city asked them to provide for the city trees tree protection guarantee, which you normally hold up to 2 years.
2 years.
To see how the tree goes.
The last question I have is, I think, the most important. There's no doubt in the room there's a lot of concern over severances that are being granted by the Committee of Adjustment. There's a lot of public opinion on some of the rulings of Committee of Adjustment, but it is what it is. When you're asked to comment on a Committee of Adjustment matter, am I correct in that you don't take into account anything with respect to sentiment or how egregious the particular application is? You look at the tree. In other words, you look at a severance the same way as you would somebody that's trying to add a 3-foot addition to their house that might actually conflict to a tree. So in both cases, you'd say, look, this impacts the tree, our advice is not to do this.
Our position is really neutral. Look at the tree and the impact that the proposed consent or proposed variance is to the tree. So if the tree is in direct conflict with the proposed consent, then we object to that consent. If the tree is in indirect conflict with proposed variances only, then we object to the proposed variances.
Correct.
So City of Toronto revised the guideline how to review the Committee of Adjustment application 2 years ago, and that's why we object or request deferral for the application that proposals are in direct conflict with the trees.
So to sort of summarize, you offer advice of rejection in circumstances when the tree is essentially going to be harmed because of the proposal before you. But a proposal to sever a lot would receive the same objection as would a proposal to put a family room on the back of a house that, in all due respects for the entire Committee of Adjustment process, wouldn't be contested by anybody, but yet if it was going to take a tree out, would be at the same stature or objection as would a lot severance.
It's the same thing in terms of reviewing the application. However, it's one difference. When they come as a right to build, then on the tree bylaw, urban forestry issue the permit for that tree. So if let's say they're having addition in the house, which the zoning bylaw allows that, so the tree is within the building envelope for the zoning bylaw as of right, then urban forestry issue the permit according to the tree bylaw.
Right, and you wouldn't be at the Committee of Adjustment, but if that little addition was just a little bit more, and we see them all the time at Committee of Adjustment, not contested by anybody, you would have to object as well.
It doesn't matter who owns the tree, the neighbor or on the side, we object.
Okay, point made. Thank you.
Councilor Giorgio, a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Max, when someone applies to Committee of Adjustment, typically the Committee of Adjustment may give approval on the condition that the tree gets clearance, the removal of the tree gets clearance through urban forestry, correct? Yeah. And the applicant then makes an application to injure the tree if in fact he has difficulty with trying to achieve what he's trying to achieve. He puts a deposit in. My question is the deposit anywhere near or in the neighborhood of what the actual value of the tree, some of those trees that we're talking about on 27th Street, is the deposit reflective of the value of the tree or not?
Yes, the answer is yes. The deposit is based on the diameter of the tree, the species of the tree, and the health condition of the tree. It's a formula approved by City Council, which we apply it.
Okay. Now, in the event that the tree does die, let's say after 2 or 3 years, we at least have, when do we return the deposit?
Normally after 2 years, the construction is done. And if we can prove that the tree died because of the construction, then the owner will lose the security deposit.
Okay, so one of the, let's say the tools that we have at our disposal is to effectively either prolong the period that we hold on the deposit or in the alternative, if we sense that the tree is dying after 2 years, we basically say, you're not getting your deposit back. beyond that, given that the health of the tree or the preservation of the tree was sort of, I call it a zoning condition, because the Committee of Adjustment gave them approval subject to the tree remaining healthy. If in fact the tree dies, would that be in contravention of the Committee of Adjustment approval? In other words, could we go after them from a zoning point of view and say, look, there was a condition that you failed to meet. Notwithstanding that you've built the houses already, you must still comply with that condition.
I don't know that, to be honest.
Well, I don't either.
Consult with the Committee of Adjustment.
It would already be built. Right. But theoretically, you could take them to court, and I'm driving at the penalty. If they're not in compliance with the zoning, theoretically, the courts could inflict a more severe penalty.
Sorry, Councilor Georgia. One thing that I may clarify is that urban forestry take deposits only for city-owned trees, not for the private trees.
Okay.
Just to make it clear to everybody that maybe I was not clear.
Yeah, that wasn't clear. I read here that submission of a complete application to permit, injure, or destroy a tree. I thought it was in general. I didn't realize it was related only to
for city trees, not for
only for city trees. So for private, we don't have anything.
Not take a deposit, security deposit, tree protection, security deposit.
Oh, we don't take a deposit, but they do enter into an agreement with the city.
Yes, sign undertaken and release. Yes.
Okay. So within the 2-year period, could we proceed on the zoning aspect?
Not sure for that, for zoning.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. To, question? Yeah. Question, Councilor Nunziata.
Okay, just on that point, so, but private trees, are they, the comments that you send to the committee, they're similar than a city tree? Are they protected in the same way as well?
They are protected in the same way. However, the bylaw authorizes urban forestry to issue permit for the private trees if the project is approved by Committee of Adjustment. For city trees, Committee of Adjustment does not have full authority for us to issue the permit, even if they approve the project. So maybe it could go to Committee Council and City Council. One example we have in your area was 135 John Street.
Yeah, but Max...
That's still up now, but we objected for it.
But Max, you and I went to the OMB on a committee of severance, and my community argued about the tree, and the OMB approved it, even though it was damaging all the trees on the property. You were there with me.
Yes, I've
been there. So that's what I'm saying. Our rules are not tight enough. Like they're getting approval.
But they get approval, but I cannot stop OMB or TLAB to approve it. That's what I'm saying here. The tree bylaw have a rules and regulation to based on their approval. It's part of the official plan, balancing the development, neighborhood, and environment.
So, but when it comes to the lab, I mean, can't we have strict rules then? At least we can. There's protection for us. Otherwise, you know, yeah, or something. I mean,
okay, seeing no further questions, speakers, it's my word, and I'll speak. I want to thank the Long Branch Neighborhood Association for bringing this forward to my office, and I'm happy to bring this forward and ask for the report. I'm not prepared to move receipt on this day, so I'm going to be moving deferral to next day. Because there's some recommendations I haven't had a chance to look at, they would like me to move on their behalf, and I'm happy to do that. So, and I'd also like to work with forestry and maybe with planning. What's happening, we're under siege in Long Branch, very desirable neighborhood. Guys are coming in, developers coming in, not from the area, don't really care. They've kind of built some of the stuff under their costs and just hacking out these 150-year-old trees. We just had a commemoration of a 250-year-old oak, and someone said maybe 350 years old. So it's on the top of the list for the residents of Long Branch, but they're coming in here, hacking them out. What's happening is they get the committee of adjustment. We've had some success now where we defer it in order to get the applicant to listen to the neighbors and say, look, try and work around the tree, revise your application. In some case that's happening, some case it's not. But then you have the guys split these lots. They're out of here in 2 years. The new people move in. They don't know kind of what happened before. They bought this $1 million home. And then they may make some alterations, and before you know it, you see what happens to the trees that were shown by the association here today. And it's happening more and more and more, and people are ticked off with it. So Councillor Doucette, our tree advocate, is saying there's, changes coming on that with the committee of adjustment, but I think we have to somehow get a value on these trees and get the committee to understand the value of these trees, and it's just, it's happening one after the other. So I think my association will be okay if I defer it to look at those recommendations, work with planning, work with the committee and see what we can come, and then I know probably in the new term there'll be some other changes to it that'll be music to the community's ears, not only my community, but throughout the city. So with that, I do want to mention Max. Doctor, you've been fantastic in my ward with doing what he can do with the tools he's got in his toolbox, but again, it goes to the OMB or T-Lab. We lose control of it, but I think it's very important that we get it up the ladder to say these are important to the community and make these changes. So I'll defer it till next day in order to meet with my association, forestry, planning, and see what can be done. Speak to deferral, Councillor Holiday.
I'll be very brief. I will support the deferral, but I wanted to make two comments on this. And the first is to underscore my positive experiences with the forestry department. I believe they provide excellent advice, and they know all there is to know about trees, and can teach a lot of people a lot of the way to do the right thing. And I agree with the information that Mr. Dita told us today, is that where we tend to get into trouble is where people don't adhere to the rules and the policies around this. And the problem is that the result of this shows up a couple of years down the road. And that's a hard thing because people change hands of lots, and the burden of proof is very, very hard to establish 2 years later on. I will say one other comment though, and I think it's a caution about the public policy around attempting to increase the stature or the weighting of a tree at the Committee of Adjustment. We've delegated the Committee of Adjustment authority and judgment in these matters, and I want to be very careful about the messages and the signals that we're doing, because it's a double-edged sword, and I understand there's a lot of struggle with the decisions around lot splitting, and I understand the politics around that, and I understand the concern, and I know Long Branch, and I get it. But the double-edged sword is there's also going to be times at the Committee of Adjustment where someone is applying for something that nobody has any problem with. It's a larger deck, it's a small extension to a home that meets all of the tests, but if we ask to elevate the stature of trees to that height to deal with things like lot splitting, on the other side of the coin, where there is a non-contentious issue at the Committee of Adjustment, it could also be hung up with a tree. And I'm not sure the broad public consensus will be in agreement with that. So in thinking about how this is done, I hope we can think of those both sides of the scenario and find a way forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Seeing no further speakers, I'm going to defer till next day. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. See, Max, we love you. Should I set point of order?
I'm sorry for the confusion earlier. There was an item I wanted to add to the agenda, but I just had to speak to Steve Kadama to change the wording.
I'm sorry, you want to add to the agenda?
Yes, we're adding item 55, but I've already changed the wording a bit.
Okay.
So the wording will be up on the screen if I could please add this to the agenda.
Okay, delay on the screen here. Thanks, Judy. Thank you. Okay, it's on the screen. We need
basically asking transportation.
Yeah, we're going to add to the agenda. So yeah, okay.
Add to the agenda.
All in favor of adding to the agenda? Opposed? Carried. She's on there.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to just deal with it?
I'm happy to just support it and ask for your support on this. I'm basically asking staff to look at reports they already have.
All in favor?
And
opposed?
look at traffic.
Carried. Okay, where are we going now? We're going to, hold on a minute. We're not done.
It's a report that's
Sorry?
her now. It's not coming to us.
Which one?
Item number 9.
31.9, interim directions of St. Clair Old Weston, Stephen Job, Diamond Corp, Steve Diamond? Is Steve Diamond here? Oh, I'm Stephen's Job. Okay, I'm sorry. From Diamond Corp. Okay. So no, any further speakers to the item?
What item is this?
31.9.
Thank you.
Seeing none, Councillor Palacio, questions of staff?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Palacio to speak.
Yeah, I would like to move recommendation, if I can have the recommendation on the screen. In essence, what I'm doing is replacing recommendation number 1 with the following, that City Council direct city staff, including the Director of Affordable Housing, to continue to negotiate with the applicant to resolve the outstanding issues detailed in this report and to streamline the application in accordance with the open door policies. On December the 5th, 6th, and 7th of last year, City Council, through the Executive Committee, approved the affordable component of this development there. So, and I think it's essential to be on the same page. I did speak to planning staff and also to the applicant with regards to this, and they're okay with that. So that's the purpose of the recommendation. Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. 23? It's me. Oh, okay, always stop control at Morrison and 4th and Morrison and Street and 9th. Questions of staff. My good friends at Transportation. If you'd like to. Do you know how many requests we put in, or you got from the community to study Morrison?
How many requests?
Yes, over the last couple of years.
I don't have that information readily available.
You don't have it?
No.
Would you
Probably been a few, yeah.
A few? Okay.
Yeah, I just quickly checked with staff before. There have been a few in the past, but we couldn't recall exactly how
Well,
many.
before there's been a lot. Okay, so you got the stats, that's what I needed, so, okay, thank you. Questions, staff? Okay, so I will speak as my ward. I very, very rarely overturn Transportation's recommendations. This case, I'm going to move the recommendation to approve these 2 stop signs. This is Morrison Street, which is south of Lakeshore Boulevard, and I had a chance to talk with Councillor Doucette before the meeting started this morning. We are getting bombarded with the way traffic's moving through our neighborhoods. I had a child hit on a bike there a couple weeks ago. We had a cyclist hit on Stanley the other day. It is crazy the way people are traveling through our neighborhoods at this point, and we are getting inundated with calls to our office. So, you know, we have to do something to slow these people down. And again, I can count on this hand in my 15 years when I've gone against Transportation staff, but on Morrison Avenue, people are heading down there to get off Lakeshore Boulevard and darting across. So, with that, I am going to be moving the approval of those stop signs. Speakers, Councillor Campbell, like to speak?
Because, you know, the more cars stop, the more greenhouse...
Is this one like in your ward, that one staff against?
Yeah, no, I just want to comment.
Same one, right?
Just a general comment on stop signs in general, right? I mean, this road has what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stop signs already. You know, we're not helping the 2 more now. We're not helping the environment and greenhouse gases, and I know Councillor Doucette is concerned about the environment and greenhouse gases. The cars... There's no electric cars now. The kids. There's sidewalks on one side. Anyway, you know what? I'm gonna support the local councillor because I know he's trying to make things safer in his ward.
Seeing no further speakers, all in favor? Opposed?
I'm again.
Carried, Kim. Sorry, guys. Okay, moving right along. 49. 49. Who would that be? Yeah. 49, Councillor Palacio, feasible renaming a public square fronting Santa Chiara Parquet to Anna Maria D'Amico Square. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a recommendation as you know, that the unthinkable tragedy that unfolded it was April the 23rd of this year on Young and Finch, and created within my community another sentiment that was huge. And Anna Maria, living in that community on North Cliff, she was very generous at heart, and she always went the extra mile to help people out in every way that she could. And she won 2 awards and so on, and she was known within the community for not only for volunteering, for her generosity of heart, but for being one of the best kids that we have in that community. So having had a lot of discussions with the community, the recommendation that I'm putting forward is asking city staff to look at the feasibility of doing that and report back. And this is a one-time only as it applies to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All All in favor? 50, request for attendance at Toronto Local Appeal Body hearing, 38 31st Street in Long Branch. All in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Carried. 51, Safety Improvement, Queens Avenue and Stanley Avenue. This is my ward again. I'm asking for a report request. This is where a child was just hit near there a couple weeks ago by a car, and we had someone hit by a cyclist hit. So that Queens Avenue keeps coming up again and again. I'm asking staff to look and work with me to see what we can do there. So all in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3152, report for traffic calming on Palermo Avenue. We've got a new subdivision going in there that the Madame Homes is building in there. It's a straightaway. We've asked staff to report and look at that over the years. Getting asked again, so another report request for Palermo, very long stretch. All in favor?
Is there an election this year?
No, not for me. Opposed? Carried. 53, speed limit reduction on Superior Avenue, Stanley.
Sir, I actually have a serious question about that last one.
Which one?
The last one about where Madame Homes is putting in its long straightaway?
Palermo?
Palermo.
Yeah. Reopen Palermo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Questions of staff?
So the question is, question of staff, so this particular road, can we not compel the home builder to put in traffic provisions, chicanes, what have you, alter the road, to make the road,
But to be fair, Councillor Campbell, I'm asking for a report. They don't know. They haven't looked at it, but again, it's just being built now. It's not finished. So they'll have to do the work to see the amount of new homes going in. And if this is just new to them, they know I'm walking this on, but I'm asking them to come back and look at it and look at that new infill.
We'll read that report with interest, Mr. Chair.
Saved you guys again, hey Naz? Okay, are you done? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3153, again, another report request for me from Superior Stanley. All in favor?
No, that's to reduce the speeds.
Oh, I'm sorry, 53 is,
I just report, eh?
yes, the route speed limits on Superior, Stanley, Albert, Cavell, and Burlington from 50 to 40. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed. Carried. And the last one, 54, temporary traffic control signal, Newton Road and Hunter Avenue. Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one of the downsides that we have with the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. And last year there were some changes suggested by staff to allow the traffic to roll on Kirk Newton. And the closest proximity is Dufferin Street in Eglinton, creating a tremendous gridlock in that section there. So there is a safety issue for the community overall. And what I'm asking is for a report and for city staff to investigate the feasibility to have something very temporary there and to bring back a report to the next council meeting.
All in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
I think that's everything, right? Okay. Trustee Campbell, Councillor Campbell, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills?
I do, Mr. Chair, but before I do so, I'd just like to take a moment to talk about the Committee of Adjustment, and because I had to step out of the room when
our process does not allow that,
when
so
we were
can you
talking
just
about
read the bills?
I'll read the bills. I was just trying to, Councillor Mamalidi gets all kinds of latitude and then he takes off, and there's no justice. That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws Bill 669 to 682, 719, 726, and 735, and excluding Bill 676 prepared for the June 6, 2018 meeting 31 of the Community Council.
Shall these bills be passed, declared as bylaws? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Nunziata, you have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill.
Yes, that the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceeding of the Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 31 on June 6, 2018.
See, Councillor Campbell, that's how it's done. You see that? Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? All in favor? Recorded vote. Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holliday, and Trustee Campbell, Councillor Campbell. That carries unanimous. I can't wait to see you guys all tonight.
No, do we not have to pass an absentee?
No. No?
I'll be holding my seminar on school board lands and how they close and open schools. I'll be doing that at 5:30 today.
It's our bowling banquet that night.
And at 5 o'clock, you can attend my C of A seminar.